What's up, guys?
Hey everybody.
Welcome to another Sunday Travel Therapy Mentor live video. This week, the holiday season is in full swing, so we're talking about holiday pay for travelers, things like holiday pay, guaranteed hours, how that works with travel therapy, 40-hour guarantees. What does that include? So that's the big topic here. Is if you have a 40-hour guarantee in your contract, does that include any time off, or does it just include certain times off? And you'll find out that varies a lot. So we're going to get into that topic. First, Whitney's going to introduce us, and then we'll jump right into it.
All right. Hey guys, thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to do some quick introductions here, let some people hop on the video with us tonight. Jared's going to share our video in a couple groups so that more people can join us live. I see a few of you guys are hopping on already. We'd love to hear from you in the comments if you're listening live. So for some introductions, my name is Whitney Aiken.
And I'm Jared Kazaza.
And we are the faces behind the Travel Therapy Mentor website and Facebook page and Instagram also. So we are traveling physical therapists. We've been traveling PTs for about 4.5 years now. And we live and travel most of the time for our contracts in a fifth wheel camper. And we're actually coming at you live from our fifth wheel tonight. So we're in our little mobile home on wheels. Joining you guys tonight for our video. On our Travel Therapy Mentor website, we write a lot of articles and provide education to future travelers and current travelers. And we try to do these videos every week. Typically, they're on Sunday nights, but sometimes they're on a different day, just depending on our schedule. So I hope that many of you guys that'll join on tonight have joined us in the past. If you're watching and you've watched us in the past, we'd love if you'd say hi. I see Ryan is on. Hi, Ryan. If you're new to our page and you've never watched us before, we'd love if you'd say hi as well. Whoever is watching, we'd love to just hear in the comments if you are a current traveler, if you're someone who's thinking about traveling in the future, or that sort of thing, or if you're a student. That way we kind of know who the audience is. So this topic is very timely and applicable, wondering about guaranteed hours and what that means and how you get paid during the holidays. We just had Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's are right around the corner. So this is very applicable, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about my current situation on my contract and kind of how my guaranteed hours are working and all of that. Ryan has questions about UFC, probably not applicable. I heard about that. That's gross.
His lip? Oh man, that's gross.
Not applicable. Hi Rachel, thank you for joining us. Rachel's a third-year student PT, possibly looking to travel. That's awesome, Rachel. We love when students join on with our videos and our content because it's a great time for you guys to learn a little bit about what to expect when you pursue travel therapy to decide if it's right for you, and then that way you're the most prepared when you do start traveling, so you kind of know some of the ins and outs. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. I mean, you can jump right in and you'll make some mistakes and it'll be fine. We all do in the beginning, but we hope to be able to empower you guys to learn more and be educated when you jump into the field. Hi Jeff, thanks for joining tonight. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what are guaranteed hours. Sometimes you'll hear it called like a 40-hour guarantee or a 36-hour guarantee or a guaranteed work week. We're going to talk about what that is, kind of usually what it applies to, and then we're going to talk to you about how that applies to the holidays.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions last year around this time as well as this year. People asking, I have time off or the clinic's closed. What does that mean for me in terms of pay? So yeah, it's a good thing to cover right now.
Yeah. So what does it mean to have a guaranteed work week or guaranteed hours?
So this is a term that's used often. We, in the travel therapy world, we advocate usually that you try to get 40 hours guaranteed if possible for the people that, work through recruiters that we work with or that contact us asking for advice. Some jobs don't allow that, but basically the 40-hour guarantee is, it says that, if you don't get the required hours for the week for whatever reason, that you get paid for those hours anyway. Most commonly, this happens in the form of things like low census. So for example, say you work at an outpatient clinic and your entire afternoon cancels. And that sounds crazy probably to some of you guys, but that's happened to me a few different times. And the reason for that is, some of these rural outpatient hospitals where you have a patient every hour, you might only have 4 people on your schedule, and you might only have 3 slots booked, and then if you happen to have 3 cancellations, you might have the whole afternoon off. So in that situation, do you get paid for those hours if you leave early? And every company handles this differently. But in general, that's what it means is if you don't work those hours completely, you still get paid for those hours.
Right. And so generally what Jared's getting at is it's usually when it's the facility's fault. Not that it was really their fault, but it was out of your control. You showed up for work.
It's not your fault, basically.
You showed up for work. You were prepared to work that full day, and then some of your patients canceled, or say it was an acute care or a skilled nursing facility, and you just didn't have enough patients to see for that day, and you went home early, and you only got 6 hours that day instead of 8. So generally what a guaranteed work week means is if the facility is unable to give you the full 40 hours or 36 hours, whatever happens to be written in the contract, you'll still get paid for those hours. And that's a huge perk for us as travel therapists because we're making a huge commitment by coming there, moving there, and relocating and everything to take these jobs. You don't want to be getting there and only getting paid for part of a week when you were there and you were prepared to work. So it's a really cool thing as a travel therapist that we have. We're hourly employees, but most of the time you can get guaranteed hours, but you always have to make sure it's written into each and every contract, and you have to ask your recruiter what this particular contract includes, because they don't all include it.
I wrote an article about this a few months ago, but a traveler with a 40-hour guarantee really is the best of both worlds, because a normal hourly employee, let's say that same scenario where your whole afternoon cancels, you only get paid for the morning. You have to go home, you don't get paid for those hours you don't work. A salaried employee, on the other hand, you'd still get paid for those hours. But in another example, let's say you're really busy, you had 4 evals in a day, and you have to stay after and type those evals, you don't get paid for that time you work over 8 hours as a salaried employee. With a 40-hour guarantee as a traveler, you get the benefit of both of those things. So if you work over 40 hours, you get paid for more than 40 hours. You still get paid overtime. If you work less than 40 hours for, any reason that is not because of you, something that you chose to do, then you would still get paid for 40. So you get the positive benefits of both salary and hourly pay, which is a really cool thing.
Yeah. So I see Matt is on. Hi, Matt. If any other, hey, Tara, if any other current travelers are on, if you're on right now, if you guys would just type in the comments if the current contract that you're on, if you guys have a 40-hour guarantee, or if you have a 36-hour guarantee, or if you have no guarantee.
Well, sometimes 32 hours too.
Or 32.
I usually see either 32 or 40, but...
Yeah, I've seen 36. So it depends a lot on the travel company, and it sometimes depends on the facility, what they will allow. At my current contract, I have a 40-hour guarantee, which is awesome. And we always advocate that you guys try to push for that, try to negotiate that if possible. But sometimes they'll say, well, this skilled nursing facility will only guarantee 32 or 36. And that's better than nothing, but it's certainly not, because, gosh, what if your whole week fell apart and you only worked like 22 hours? That would be awful because you would only get paid for 22 hours. But, if you can get 40, it's the best. But if they'll say only 36, if everything else is pretty good in the contract, that's okay. Matt says he got 36, so that's not too bad. In those situations, I usually try to push for a little bit higher pay to try to offset those weeks so you might not get a full 40 hours.
Yeah, if possible.
So that's a little bit about kind of like what a general 40 or 36 or whatever guarantee is. We want to talk about more so like what is covered and what isn't covered in most situations.
And this varies, like I said earlier, this varies based on the company. So some companies will basically, no matter why, for any reason that you miss hours, whether it's a hurricane or a flood or a power outage or snow or a holiday or low census or anything, they'll still pay you for the 40 hours. So if you miss any time, you'd still get paid for those hours. Some companies don't do it that way. Some companies will only count the 40-hour guarantee if it's for low census. Mm-hmm. So if there's a situation that the clinic can't necessarily control, things like a holiday, they can't change the date of a holiday, or a hurricane or snow or anything like that, then you wouldn't get paid for those hours. So that varies a lot from travel company to travel company.
Yeah.
And some of those things won't matter. So say your contract is in skilled nursing, they're not closed any days. Even if there's a flood or whatever, there's still going to be residents there. They're still going to need physical therapy, occupational therapy, whatever. So in that situation, this doesn't really apply that much. Almost the only time that you would have not 40 hours is census related. And but in outpatient clinics, especially for PTs that work in outpatient, there's a lot of times that the clinic will be closed for various reasons. Patients can't get there for whatever reason.
Yeah. Now, this may not matter during some times of the year. So say you're going to be working a contract between like August and October, and you're like, well, there's not really any holidays during that time anyway, so I'm not going to bother asking about all that. But it's really important if you're planning to work a contract that does go through like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. That's when you really need to ask up front when you're signing your contract what's included in your 40-hour guarantee so you can manage your expectations, because there's nothing worse than thinking that you're going to get paid for certain days and you're not going to get paid for certain days.
Yeah.
And for example, on my current contract, it goes through Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, Christmas, New Year's Eve, and New Year's. That's like 5 to 6 potentially days that I may or may not get paid for that I need to know about when I'm budgeting and that sort of thing. There's nothing worse than thinking you're going to get paid and you're not. So you need to manage expectations, ask questions up front. The more you learn as you go on in travel therapy, the more you'll know to ask when you're negotiating and signing your contract. This is one of the things that's on our list to ask about.
Now, something I should mention here is that the companies that I said will pay for pretty much no matter what happens, holidays and all that, where the clinic is closed. Usually those companies are not getting paid by the facility when those hours happen. So almost always the travel company is only getting paid by the facility when the traveler is in the clinic working, or in some situations when the census is low. But almost never is the travel company paying or getting paid by the facility for a holiday. So the companies that do this, they're usually taking a hit on that pay. Basically, they're paying you for hours that they're not being paid for. So what does that mean? Well, if you know that all the money comes from the facility overall, and you know that the travel company still has to make a profit, if they're paying you for holiday hours, that means that somewhere else in the pay package that's accounted for, which usually means they're paying you less per week than they normally would to account for those times when they're going to have to pay travelers when they're actually not getting paid themselves.
Yeah, and that's kind of across the board, and that's not something you really think about on a contract by contract basis. But for example, we've worked with one company that was a really big, really well-known company, very large company, and they would always pay us no matter what. Like if we worked holidays, we got paid on, or we didn't work holidays and the facility was closed, we still got paid. And we were like, oh, cha-ching, like we're getting paid extra, we're not working these days, this is great. We worked a couple contracts where there was a hurricane, we didn't work on the hurricane days and we still got paid, and we were like, oh yeah, this is great. Well, the company I'm with right now doesn't pay when holidays or inclement weather, and I'm like, dang, that sucks, I can get paid for those free days. But the company I'm with right now pays significantly higher on a week-to-week basis and on a contract-to-contract basis than the other company. So looking back, I'm like, well, they were just taking that out of their margins across the board. So it's like, it seemed like I was getting free money during that contract, but, really I wasn't.
And I don't remember what video we talked about this, but maybe 2 weeks ago, but we talked about how companies use certain schemes, things like PTO and tuition reimbursement and those things to make it more appealing to travelers. And this is kind of one of those things. So, yeah, you're getting paid for holidays. It seems awesome. It really feels good. I mean, no matter how much you rationalize it in your head, it feels awesome when you get paid for a holiday, or you get paid for a hurricane day or a snow day when you're at home. It seems awesome. But, if you're getting paid $100 or $200 less per week, every week to account for that, then, it might not be worth it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, some of you guys might be watching this and think, okay, well, 40-hour guarantee, that's probably not going to apply that often. But in reality, it does apply a lot. In 3 years, the first 3 years that we started traveling, I got paid for over 200 hours that I didn't actually work due to things like holidays, snow days, low census, all those things. So 200 hours, that's a lot. That's 5 weeks of pay that I got paid for that I wasn't actually in the clinic. So it's a lot more common than you think. In terms of 40-hour guarantees, though, or any kind of guarantee, so like Jessica said, she doesn't have a guarantee on her contract. Some facilities just will not do that. And it depends on their needs. So think about it from a facility perspective. If they know that there's going to be a lot of fluctuation in patient load, and they might only have 20 hours of patients for you to see one week, and then maybe 40 the next week, they're not going to want to guarantee hours because they're going to be paying for all that time that you're not working. So it varies so much from facility to facility, and not only from facility to facility, but also from job to job, because one clinic at a facility might need, they might be desperate for a PT. They actually probably need 1.5 PTs there, but they're going to try to make do with one. Whereas another contract, like Whitney's case, she went into a clinic that probably only needed like a part-time PT, and they're hiring a traveler. So it varies so much.
Yeah. So these are all just things that we want you to think about when you're choosing a contract, but they're certainly not a deal breaker. If you're looking at a contract and they say, I'm sorry, we just can't guarantee hours, or we can only guarantee 32 hours, it may or may not be a deal breaker. So if everything else is really great, you love the location, you love the setting, the interview went well, the pay is pretty good, it may not be a deal breaker for you. It's just something to take into account with the overall pay package and the overall job. Same thing with if they say, well, no, like the holidays aren't paid, you're not getting paid for those days. It's not a deal breaker. Yes, you're going to make a little bit less money, but is everything else good? Well, maybe you still go with that contract. It's just one more thing to think about, especially if you had like 2 offers for 2 different jobs, and one company was going to do something the other one wasn't, and they were about equal otherwise. It might be something to consider.
Yeah, that can sway your opinion for sure. If the pay was going to be equal between a job that would pay for holidays and one that wouldn't, okay, then probably you go with that one. But yeah, that is, in the grand scheme of things, it's probably a small factor.
Yeah. And do you want to talk about the hourly versus the stipends also?
Yeah, so some companies will pay, basically, they will guarantee your stipend no matter what. They'll pay you that stipend amount, the non-taxable portion of your pay. But if you don't actually work the hours, they won't pay you the hourly portion. And then some companies won't pay at all for, if you don't work those hours for a holiday or whatever, they won't pay hourly or the stipend portion, which is, it's a little sketchy because the non-taxable portion should be kind of guaranteed no matter what. And the reason for that is that we are traveling outside of our home area. So just because the clinic is closed or because we didn't work or whatever, doesn't change our housing costs and our meal costs, right? So that should be a guaranteed thing, but companies definitely get away with that. They use wording that makes it okay in the eyes of the IRS, but that should be it should be something that doesn't happen, but it does happen. So there are situations where you might lose both your hourly pay and your stipends for hours that you don't work.
Yeah, so it's important to, when you're looking at the fine print of your contract, just understand what that means. When they cut your pay for if you don't get all your hours, how much exactly is going to be deducted off your paycheck that week, just so you can budget and plan and understand. And if you maybe don't think to ask all these questions when you sign the contract, at least the first time it happens, sort of look through your paycheck and try to do the math yourself and break down exactly what they deducted and make sure it's right, because there are paycheck errors sometimes, and you want to make sure that the amount they deducted is the accurate amount they were supposed to deduct based on what you signed on your contract.
Yeah, and real quick, let's mention that for the people that have like 32 or 36 hour offers, guaranteed hour offers given to them, the important thing there is to run the numbers, because when a recruiter gives you an offer, they're always basing it on 40 hours. So they'll say you'll get paid, let's say, $1,600 a week after taxes. Well, that number, $1,600 a week, is based on 40 hours. If you only have a 32-hour guarantee, then you need to reverse the math. Basically take that 1,600 divided by 40, multiply by 32 to see what you would get paid for 32 hours, and make sure that's enough to cover your expenses.
Yes.
Because if you only have a 32-hour guarantee, that's all you can count on. And there might be the entire contract. Worst case scenario might be the whole contract. You only work 32 hours a week. Mm-hmm. So, when you get those offers, realize that is based on 40 hours, and you need to make sure that you'd be able to make do with that actual 32-hour pay.
And a really good recruiter will break it down for you that way.
Yeah.
They'll say, this is how much you'll get paid every week after taxes if you work 40 hours. This is how much you'll get paid every week if you only work 32 hours, and you need to account for that. And that's, again, where I usually would want to push for a little higher pay, because it's like, yeah, you're making it sound really great if I work 40 hours, but if I don't work 40 hours, maybe we need to up that pay a little bit there for a buffer.
Yeah.
So we got a couple comments here, and then we'll dive into a little bit more talking specifically about holiday weeks.
Yeah, so Jeff was asking about an act of God that happened in the beginning of his contract, where there was a power outage. Car hit a telephone pole, they didn't have power, so he couldn't work, and he didn't get paid for that time. So that basically falls into the exact situation of like holiday pay.
Or inclement weather.
So the companies that will pay no matter what would still pay you for those hours. The companies that won't pay for anything that isn't directly
the facilities control.
isn't in the facilities control wouldn't pay you for that. So that's a bad situation. It does happen.
It's going to be rare.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's very
in most
rare.
cases, it's going to be rare, like hitting a power pole, But,
the majority of companies wouldn't pay you for that because they're not getting paid for that. The facility is not going to pay for hours where the therapist goes home early because of an act of God.
Yeah. I would say in some cases, like, you could probably really push it with your recruiter and say, like, look, I did everything I could to be there. Like, can you somehow make up this pay to me? And maybe they'll throw you a bone, but maybe they won't. It just sort of depends. But I think that's going to be a rare situation. Nikki says, in my contract, I'm guaranteed 32 hours. I can't talk. 32 hours, but they try to force me to be there 40 hours a week, even if the census is low. The caseload simply isn't there. In this case, what should I do?
That sounds wonderful to me. I understand it. It can be frustrating to have to basically do 8 hours of like BS work. But if I was only guaranteed 32 hours, and the option was either I go home after 32 and not get paid for it, or I stay for 40 and do like clerical work, I would stay for 40.
Yeah, because Nikki, what they're doing here is they're actually trying to give you hours so you can get paid. Now, if you really just want to get out of there in 32 hours because you're in a financially stable position and you don't care if you only work 32 hours, I mean, yeah, like maybe you could just get out of there. But if in most cases, we're always trying to get our 40 hours so we can get our full pay. So even if that means sitting there and doing clerical stuff or helping or adding more minutes onto the time with the patients you do have when possible, trying to get your hours is a good thing.
Yeah, that might be a little frustrating to you, but realize that a lot of travelers would love that situation if they only had a 32-hour guarantee, where the company is actually trying to get them to get their full pay, get the full 40 hours.
So Tara has a specific question about holiday weeks. Tara, we're going to talk a little bit more about holidays, and then we'll come back and address your other questions. So that kind of explains like what a general guaranteed work week is and how that kind of works over in general. So when it comes to the holidays, there's some things that you need to take into account when you're signing on your contract if you know there's a holiday coming up, especially Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. I mean, throughout the year, like 4th of July and some other ones, maybe not, but definitely like the big holiday season. You want to find out if the facility is going to be open or closed. Now, if you're working at a hospital or you're working at a skilled nursing facility, you pretty much know in general they're going to be open. But like outpatient is where you're typically going to not know whether they're working that day. Maybe home health, you don't know whether they work that day. So find that out. Hey, are you guys open or closed? If you are open, am I expected to work? Do you need me to work those days? Under most cases, if they're open, they're going to want you to work because probably their permanent staff has already requested time off and they've arranged all their time off requests up front. So probably they're going to want their traveler to work because that's why you're there, is to help them out. So if you are expected to work, you need to ask, okay, if I'm going to work like on Christmas Day, do I get holiday pay or like extra pay or overtime type of pay for that?
To be clear, you wouldn't ask your facility this. You would ask the travel company this.
Yes. So this is like anything you want to talk to you about with your recruiter.
Almost every company has some kind of clause in the contract about holiday pay, and usually it'll be time and a half of your hourly pay, and then you also get stipends, so you might make an extra $10 or $12 an hour. But sometimes it'll be $60 or $70 an hour they'll pay for holidays. So it varies a lot, and it from company to company, but it also varies because the facilities sometimes will not pay holiday pay not only to travelers, but sometimes they don't pay their permanent staff holiday pay. So if they don't pay their permanent staff, they're not going to pay the travel company more money for you to be there on a holiday.
Yeah.
So definitely something to clarify with your recruiter.
Yep. So if you do find out that you're going to have to work the holiday, clarify with your recruiter if you're going to get paid normal on that day or you're going to get paid extra because you're working a holiday. Now, if you're off work, like if they say, 1, our facility is closed, or they say 2, we don't want to pay you extra to be here on the holiday, so we're going to give you that day off. Then find out, okay, if that's the case, if they tell you don't work that day, maybe they might ask you to work a different day. If it's a hospital or something, they might want you to work like the weekend before or the weekend after to make it up. Or you might request to work the weekend before or the weekend after so you can try to get more hours. So that happens a lot because like at my current job, I'm at an outpatient. And we're closed, like I said, on Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, Christmas, New Year's Eve, New Year's. That's 6 days that I'm not working. So what I've done is I've requested to work a little bit extra on the days that I am at work to try to get some more hours and get a little bit higher pay those weeks. So like I worked a longer day the day before Thanksgiving to try to offset my 2 days that I didn't get paid. I still didn't get 40 hours, but I got closer to like 25, 26 hours. And I'm going to do the same thing Christmas week and New Year's Eve week. So those are some things you can do. Ask if you can work an extra day that's not normally on your schedule, like a Saturday, or work extra hours to try to get a little bit extra pay. But you kind of have to think about these things in advance because they're not necessarily going to go out of their way to talk to you about it. And these are things that you would ask your manager on site if you could do. Okay. So then talking about asking off if you wanted off for the holidays.
Yeah, anytime you ask off for time, you're never going to get paid for that, whether it's a holiday week or not. Any time that is your fault, so say a doctor's appointment, you're going home for holidays, you're going home for a birthday, anything like that, you're not going to get paid for those hours. So you definitely have to plan for any time that you ask off, either directly to your travel company or to the facility that you ask for time off, that you're not going to get paid for those hours.
Typically, we recommend if you plan to want to ask off for any time during your contract, you almost always want to negotiate this prior to ever signing your contract. So if you know that Christmas is coming up during your contract, before you even sign your contract, you would want to talk to the manager during your phone interview and or talk to your recruiter and say, I am going to need a day off at Christmas, or I would like to have a day off at Christmas. Is that going to be possible? In a lot of cases, they'll say yes. In some cases, they'll say no. So you kind of have to pick your battles here. You don't want to go into the contract saying, I need Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's off and a day before and a day after, because they might just not pick you for that job. They might just pass you over and pick another candidate. So you kind of have to pick your battles, and you definitely want to make sure it's asked in advance, and you want to make sure it's written in your contract. Double check that before you sign your contract. When you arrive at your facility to start, you also want to talk to your on-site manager and make sure that they know what was written in your contract and what was agreed upon, and actually have a schedule blocked off, because I've certainly run into before where they didn't know that. Like I interviewed with my last job with the regional director, and we had requested like 2 days off, and my on-site manager had no idea, so she had me scheduled a full patient caseload on that day. So luckily I mentioned it like the week before, and she was like, oh, I didn't know that you had those days off, and she was actually kind of mad about it, but I made sure to ask and double check that, because you don't want any expectations to be off in that situation.
Yep.
So hopefully that's clear about holidays and asking off. So a couple questions here.
So Tara said, I work for Fusion. They say no guaranteed hours during the week of holidays, but let's say you work that week every day, including the holiday, but it's low census, so you don't get guaranteed even though you went each day of the week. Doesn't seem like a good incentive to work on holiday weeks if the census is low. I've never worked with a company that says no guaranteed hours on holiday weeks. Fusion could be unique in that way, or maybe there's more companies that we haven't worked with that do it that way. Usually it's just that they don't pay if the facility is closed for one reason or another. So all the companies that we work with, that I know of, would still pay if this facility was open and you went there and the census was low, coincidentally on a holiday, then they would still pay you for those hours.
Yeah.
Fusion might be unique there, but it also just might be a misunderstanding. So ask them about that. Is it no guaranteed hours on the holiday week, or is it on the day itself? Like if if they were closed that day, yeah. Or whatever. But yeah, that could just be a Fusion thing. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I would definitely ask about that, because it kind of sounds like they're probably just trying to say like, no, you're not going to get your guaranteed hour if they're closed, but ask if they're open, if you still know. Yeah, so I would clarify on that. That's an interesting one. Okay, Armand says, I'm on a few days off right now because I took a couple of days one week and a couple the following week. My check is taking a big hit on both the hourly and the stipends. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer when that happens.
Yeah, definitely a lot of companies do that.
Okay, Nikki says, but they harp on the productivity issue. Interesting. Nikki.
So that is a difficult situation. So this is back to Nikki's question where she was saying that they want her to stay 40 hours even though she's only working our guaranteed 32. Facilities are weird sometimes. And I assume you're probably talking about skilled nursing, but sometimes they'll do this thing where they want you to be clocked in to get your hours, but they also want you to maintain a high productivity. And in that situation, those things don't make any sense. If the census doesn't support you getting the hours, then there's no way to have a high productivity.
Right.
And in that situation, you just basically have to talk to the rehab director and be like, which one of these things is more important to you? Is it more important that I get a high productivity, or is it important that I get 40 hours, or whatever my guaranteed hours are? And I'll do that thing, but you see why I can't do both. And sometimes when you actually lay that out and explain it to them, they understand more. But for some reason, some clinic directors just either they don't think about it, or they're just trying to force you to do things that don't make sense. But usually, once you explain it, they'll back down on one of those.
The only thing I can think of here is sometimes when the census gets low in skilled nursing facilities, they'll try to push you to like see the patients for longer minutes, or pick up more patients on caseload, like Part B patients, like the long-term care. And sometimes it borders on being unethical, because they're wanting you to just pick up people on caseload that don't even really need to be on caseload, only because the census is low. So it's like, okay, if I have a lot of skilled Part A short-term patients, suddenly our long-term patients are not important. But then if we don't, it's like, oh my gosh, let's see all of our long-term patients, because all of their pre-existing conditions and maintenance type programs are suddenly not good enough, and now they need more therapy. It's like a little bit sketchy, so you have to be cautious of that and use your clinical judgment.
Yep. All right, so there's a couple more things we want to cover, but real quick, all you guys on here, if you guys are getting value out of this, please like, thumbs up, hearts, comment, share with people that might also be travelers, tag them. All those things are very helpful for us. They help more people see the videos, and we do these videos every week. So it's always great to having more people watching, more people engaging with us. So if you guys could do that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate it when you guys give us the love, give us the hearts.
So in terms of Nikki's question, I want to cover some more stuff on that. You run into the situation where sometimes you'll have a 40-hour guarantee, and you don't have enough work to do to cover that full 40 hours. Some facilities are okay with you leaving. They're like, okay, I don't have any work for you to do, just go home. They're okay paying that 40 hours. Some facilities are not okay with that. They want you, okay, if I'm going to pay you for 40 hours, I want you to be here for 40 hours. And in that situation, if there's not enough, therapy-related work to do, you might end up doing things like, it depends, but sometimes like filing or calling patients to, doing reminder visits, or calling physicians, or you could even do like marketing things, or a variety of whatever they want you to do. Some people are okay with that. Some people aren't.
Discharge notes, things that just need to be done.
Yeah, so little things around the clinic, even so much as like vacuuming and things like that. So I've heard of therapists, have a 40-hour guarantee. They only have 32 hours of stuff to do, and they end up like, cleaning the clinic for 8 hours.
I've helped with charts at the front desk before, cleaning out old charts.
Now, the way I handle this is different than probably the way you should handle this. If I go to a clinic and I have a feeling that I have a 40-hour guarantee, and I have a feeling that I'm not going to get the full 40 hours, I don't mention it in the first few weeks. I'll write 40 hours on my timesheet, 40 hours guaranteed or whatever, have them sign it. If they sign it and they don't say anything about it, then I keep doing that. I keep leaving early when I don't have work to do.
Right. So if he worked like 38.5 hours and just left early that week, he would just write, because a lot of the companies, when you turn in your timesheet, they need some kind of indication as to whether it was your fault that you only worked 38 hours or it was the facility's fault.
Yeah, so some companies will say, they'll have a little box that says, was it therapist responsibility or was it facility responsibility? So in my situation, what I do is, say I worked 38 and I had a 40-hour guarantee, I would just leave when I was done with my work. I would check on their facility responsible. I'd have the clinic manager sign it. If everything's okay there, no one says anything to me, then I keep doing that. Unless they say, hey, we're paying you for 40, then stay. What you probably should do is say something to the clinic director about it and say like, hey, I'm getting paid for 40. Is it okay if I leave early, or is there something else you want me to do? I don't do that, just because I'm lazy. But yeah, that's probably what you should do. And chances are, if you open up that conversation, they'll probably say, oh, I'm paying you for 40. Yeah, you could help the office person do this or whatever. Yeah. So, you kind of have to use your judgment there, but.
Yeah, but it really depends. I mean, I think it's the trickiest when it's skilled nursing, because they're so harping on like that productivity number, and every minute that you're clocked in versus every minute that you build units is calculated in an average, and they harp on that number every week. In outpatient, it's different. It's like, well, yeah, I was supposed to see 14 people today, but only 10 showed up. Like, that's not my fault.
Yeah,
and they know it's not your fault, and it's like they don't do anything about it. But SNF, they're just so big on that productivity number. So my best advice is speak to your clinic director, your director of rehab, and try to hash it out and just see, what they want. Because you can't have it all.
Thanks for joining.
They can't have it all. But skilled nursing, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. Okay, so the last thing we want to touch on, just kind of looping back around, kind of talking about the holiday season and being a travel therapist during the holidays, is sort of back to what we talked about last week. And I don't know if you guys listened in on our video last week, but what we talked about was the upcoming January lull in the job market. So just want to recap a little bit of that and how that plays into this holiday.
So to be clear, the job's starting in January. A lot of travel therapists want to start in January for a variety of reasons, which means that you have a large supply of therapists coming into the job market at the same time, which means that a lot of jobs get taken quickly. So there's a lot less options, and it can be really hard, depending on your criteria for finding a job, to find a job in January. So, be careful about that. And like we mentioned in the last video, this also might be worse this year because of the PDPM and the PDGM changes coming. So some SNFs and some home health companies are reducing staffing already. So if there's less jobs available for travel therapists already, and then you also have a flood of therapists wanting to take jobs on the beginning of January, it might be hard to find jobs there. So so that's just a recap of that scarcity that we talked about last week.
So in general, because of that, we usually recommend that when you're approaching the end of one year and the beginning of the next year, if you can try to arrange a contract that will go through December and all the way through January, the same contract. For example, the one I'm on right now starts in November, ends in February. It's perfect because it covers this tricky time around the holidays and around January where sometimes it's hard to secure a position. But what you can do is try to secure the position that goes through there, and then in your interview, try to ask off for the days that you need off. If you really need a couple of days off around Christmas or whatever, try to arrange it that way if possible. They're really going to appreciate you if you can work part of the holidays, but maybe not the other. But we even had a contract where they just really needed us to start. They really needed us like the first 2 weeks of December, but they were agreeable to let us take off the whole like last 2 weeks of December when we requested. They were like, we really just need you here for this like training period, these first 2 weeks of December, then you can have the last 2 weeks off and pick back up in January. So we've had that happen before. You just have to ask, and you have to understand that you can't be too picky because they may pass you over for a clinician that doesn't have obligations with family and is willing to work. So kind of pick your battles there, but in the future, always make sure to ask off in advance. It doesn't hurt to ask. Make sure it gets written into the contract, and make sure that your manager is aware.
Yep. Yeah, those are the important things.
Yep. So we have another question here. Brandon
Comment.
says, comment. Brandon says, when negotiating my contracts, I try to get the most housing and meal stipend that I can because that's more money you get to pocket and the IRS doesn't see. So if you get 32 to 35 hours, you still have a good pay for the week.
Yeah, I would say
sometimes.
For the most part, you're talking about 40-hour guarantees?
Well, yeah, because he says you still get your stipends. Not all companies still give you your stipends.
It depends on the company. There are some companies that do that. Some companies that would still take your stipend if you don't work those hours for holidays or whatever. But in terms of just getting higher stipends, housing, meals, incidental stipends on your contracts, that's almost always a good thing. Unless it drops your pay so low that it's kind of
sketchy.
Yeah, sketchy. Then you might not want to do that. But for the most part, the higher stipends, the better, because that's money that you don't have to pay taxes on, and it's helpful.
Yeah, but when it comes to the guaranteed work week, as he says, if you only get 32 to 35 hours, you still get good pay for the week, only if you still get your stipends. Because if they cut a percentage of your stipends and a percentage of your hourly, then it's going to lower your pay.
Yeah, so Brandon probably works for a company that guarantees stipends no matter how many hours you work. And in that case, yes. Yeah,
so that's a good point. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to leave your questions or feedback in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Rachel says, do you work with one travel company or multiple, and what do you suggest?
So Rachel, we made a couple videos about this, but we allude to this almost constantly. We recommend working with at least 2 companies, ideally 3, and maybe even more than 3 in some situations, depending on how specific you are, either on setting, location, pay, or a variety of those factors. So definitely more than one, ideally probably 3 or more. You want to have job searching for you so that you have the most variety of job options, and you also have a little bit of competition, which is good. And if you guys are interested in the companies that we work with, if you want suggestions for yourself, depending on your situation, send us a message, or you can just comment recruiter in the comments here, and we'll send you a message with some questions about your situation so that we can try to match you with the recruiters and companies that might be good for you.
Yeah, Rachel, we always recommend, and when we say work with multiple companies, people often ask the question, how do you work with more than one company at the same time? And when we say work with, we mean communicate with. So you want to be in communication with multiple recruiters. About 2 to 3 to 4 is usually a good number of recruiters to have searching for jobs for you. So then you have the option to take a job with one or the other or the third, and you can take a job with one, and then the very next contract, if the other one has a better job, you can take that one with that one. And they usually are pretty good about this. Hopefully you always are working with recruiters that have your back and understand that it's okay if you take another job with another recruiter, even though it wasn't with them. If it's in your best interest, hopefully they have your back.
Yeah, if you work with a recruiter that gets mad that you're working with other companies, that's not somebody you want to work with.
Yeah.
So
again,
keep that in mind.
if you guys want our recommendations, we have we've taken contracts with 2, 3, 4-ish companies. But we have about 10 or so that we've kind of interviewed and gone through the process with them of understanding, what their company's like, what the recruiter's like. So that way we can make good recommendations to you guys, because we get that question all the time, like which companies are the best, which companies do we like? So we can make good recommendations for you based on what you're looking for.
And to give some perspective there, we have like 10 that we work with, but we have talked to at least a couple dozen over the years that we've talked to and we didn't like for one reason or another, or we didn't find a good recruiter there or whatever. So the 10 that we work with and that we recommend to people now are ones that we have a lot of faith in.
Yeah. So Brandon says he was talking about Med Travelers is the one that he works with that guarantees the housing and meal stipends, even if your hours are cut. So yes, Med Travelers is the one that's known for doing that. And we have a great recruiter at Med Travelers as well. If that's something you guys are interested in, we can send us a message. But yes, they guarantee the stipends regardless of whether or not your hours are cut. So that's something to consider.
Yep.
So that's a little bit about kind of how the holiday pay works, how guaranteed hours work. We just want to educate you and empower you guys to understand how this works so you don't have false expectations when you get into these situations, because there's so many people that are like, oh my gosh, my recruiter said I was going to be making $1,800 a week, but then like every week my paycheck's only been this. Why is it only this? Or I have 3 holidays during my contract and I'm not getting paid and I didn't know that, and then you end up in a bad situation. So we want you guys to think about these things when you're negotiating contracts and preparing to take contracts.
Yeah, and so the important thing here is to be knowledgeable on these things, to have some insight and be prepared. Like Whitney said, the worst case scenario is that you're expecting to get paid for a full week and you only get paid for 3 days because of Christmas Eve and Christmas. And then you don't get your full pay, and then you have trouble paying bills or whatever. So, just be prepared. As long as you're okay with the situation at hand, then that's great.
Yeah. So we have a couple other comments. We'll kind of answer some of the comments that are coming through at the end after we hop off the video. We always go back and answer questions in the comments.
So anybody watching this either live or on the replay, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments, whether they're related to this video or not. We go back and respond to that. Rachel is asking for recruiters, so anyone else that wants recruiter recommendations, feel free to comment recruiters and we'll send those to you.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for watching. We are almost at a year of these live videos every week, which is nuts. I can't believe it. I went back and counted this weekend and we were almost at like 93,000 live video views, I guess, total on these videos, which is crazy.
Yeah.
We started making these videos and didn't think we would follow up with them, but we have, and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you guys for joining, and thanks for engaging with us. Like I said earlier, if you guys could like, hearts, comments, anything on this video, the more engagement we get, the more people see it, which is great.
We really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for your support.
We'll be back next Sunday with probably a video either on PDGM and how that's going to affect the travel market, what it is, how it's going to affect the travel market, or also about the Medicare cuts that everyone's talking about now, the Medicare cuts that happened recently to therapy. So one of those topics we're going to talk about, and hopefully we can provide some insight to you guys. So tune back in next week, and we'll see you later.
All right. Thank you guys. Have a great night.
Bye.